Brew Strong is brought to you by Blickman Engineering, home of the Riptide. Visit them online at blickmanengineering.com.
Brewers, it's time for the beer radio you've been looking for. This is the show that dispels myths, tackles the toughest topics, and makes no apologies for geeking out on beer. Hosted by two guys that drink before they think, Jamil Zainasheff and John Palmer. This is Brew Strong.
Ciao, homebrew community.
What's up, my homie brewers?
This is TC.
And I'm Big Mike Persine.
This is Brew Strong.
You're listening? This is Brew Strong.
There you go. All right. Today we have our good friend Neil Spake and special guest Robert Bell. And Robert is with Hogshead Brewing in Denver, Colorado. Today's topic is Cask Ale. And of course, we're going to do our best to apply it to home brewing. That's what you guys are here for. It's going to be an interesting show, I think. If you're not familiar with Hogshead, where you can learn a lot about it today, and hopefully you get some of their beer at some point in time, because it is outstanding. You know what else is outstanding, Mike?
What?
Blickman Engineering.
Oh, yeah.
All right, home brewers, it's tax refund season, and what a better time to upgrade your brewing setup. Blickman Engineering has everything you need, from quality homebrew systems to professional grade equipment that make your brew day easier, plus a full lineup of accessories. The best part? Their expert team is with you every step of the way, ensuring you get the right gear for your brewing goals. If you're listening live, you're going to catch this in time. Go out, maybe catch a tax refund sale, get some really good products. If you're not listening live, this one might publish in time. So, Mike, you know, they've never adopted it. I guess they don't like it, but they haven't told us they don't like it. Innovating your brew day.
Innovating your brew day. Yeah, we got all the stuff. You know, I use the beer gun. That's my favorite thing in the whole world. Yep. It's just the perfect thing for bottling, canning, all that stuff. Get your stuff, really well done. It can sit in the fridge for months and still come out like the day you bottled or canned it. So I also use, Auto Sparge, Riptide. I mean, I'm a big fan. So yeah.
Absolutely. I use the beer gun. I use the Anvil Foundry. I'm a fan of the electric setup now. I don't think I can go back to propane. And if I did, I'd look at the Blickman stuff because the quality is there. It's really good stuff. So anyway, if you're getting a tax check, congratulations. And now you know how to spend it. All right. So again, we're going back to Neil Spake and Robert Bell. And Neil or Robert, can you give us a definition of cask ale?
I'll let Robert take that.
You're going to let me one. All right. Yeah, I answer this question every day, I guess. So, cask ale. Cask ale is beer that has been fermented out as a traditional beer would be fermented. However, it goes through a secondary fermentation in the cask, the vessel that it is being served out of. And it has, as a result, has a lower carbonation. We serve it at what we call a cellar temperature, which is about 50 degrees. And we believe that it presents a better flavor profile on the beer. So that's, in my definition, that's what cask ale is. A beer that is naturally re-fermented, served out of the vessel.
That's a solid, concise definition. And I imagine we're going to expand on it a bit more in the next hour or so. Reminder, this is live. If you're on Facebook, you get to see us right now. I'm not watching the chat currently, so I don't know if we have anyone actually listening. And this video will be on Facebook for 30 days, and Facebook will remove it. Facebook just made the rule. You probably got an email from Facebook, and you're like, why does Facebook email me? Because, who cares about Facebook emails? So 30 days, but JP is going to capture this video, and this video will be posted on YouTube about the same time he captures the audio and puts the podcast out, which ought to be, 4 to 6 weeks from now. All right, so let's take a quick break, and we're going to find out all about Cask Ale with Neil and Robert.
Back to the beer guys that make other beer guys look like wine guys. Brew strong.
All right, we're back, and we have Robert with Hogshead talking about Cask Ales here. And so, Robert, tell us about yourself.
All right. I've been a brewer for Hogshead since 2021. Been an owner since 2023. We're into our second year of ownership. I interned at Hogshead in 2016, so I started my brewing career there. Got into brewing from a sales career, transitioned as a result of being really into home brewing for a long time and having the passion and desire of opening my own brewery at some point. I was given the opportunity, as I said, in 2023 to buy into ownership at Hogshead Brewery, and I'm still the head brewer there now. So, yeah, that's my brewing career. I did brew for other breweries in the interim between 2016 and 2021. I was the head brewer for 2 other breweries and an assistant brewer for another brewery. So that's my journey.
You made some rounds. That's good. Yeah, it's I think it's part of the brewer's path. No one stays at it. Well, if you started off long enough ago, it seems like you might spend a lifetime at a brewery. But in more recent history, the brewers, you make your rounds, you learn what you can, you kind of move on to another brewery, learn something there. And everybody's process is a little bit different, or a lot different in some cases. So that's great. You pick up a great knowledge of how to work with whatever's thrown your way.
Absolutely.
That's my opinion.
Yeah. It's kind of brewing in general, I think.
Yeah.
Being able
Jamal
to
always
adapt to your situation.
Yeah. Jamal always said, brewing is not just brewing. In fact, it's not even mostly brewing.
Yeah. Right.
Brewing is just part of what you do when you're a brewer.
That is for sure.
Well, good stuff. All right. So I want people to understand this. Tell people what cask ale means to Hogshead. I mean, you guys throw a cask up on occasion, or how does that work out for you guys?
So we serve we lean into the cask beer heavily. It's pretty much our identity as a brewery, I would say. It's, to me, the importance of cask beer, not only from a personal drinking standpoint, but from a sustainability standpoint. It's really what kind of stands us apart from a lot of different breweries. It's something that you're not going to find a lot of places. It's something that I would say that very beer knowledgeable people may have an understanding of, maybe even have a passion for. So we kind of are able to touch that crowd. We're able to introduce new people to cask beer. But yeah, I mean, in essence, I think it's really what separates us from, 200 or 300 plus breweries in the state of Colorado, I guess,
I was thinking that many in Denver alone. I don't know. It's
yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know what those numbers are anymore.
Yeah,
good.
seriously.
Doesn't matter. Your big concerns are one brewery, and that's plenty. So I mean, did y'all start off as a cask ale brewery? Did you develop this passion, or?
Yeah. So in 2012, Hogshead started as a cask-centric brewery. I believe there were 4 engines on. I actually live in the neighborhood, and I was one of the early early visitors to the brewery, I would say. And
Very nice.
at the time, I believe there were 4 beers on, all on cask. Within 6 months, there was the introduction of CO2 forced carb beers as well. So we also have keg beers. So we have 8 keg beer lines, 9 cask beer lines. So
That's outstanding.
really lean heavily into the cask side, and it's not a novelty at our place. It's what we do. So, but yeah, it started cask centric. The original brewer, one of the owners, was from England. Had experience in brewing in England. Brought his passion for cask beer to Colorado, to Hogshead, opened it up with the help of some other folks, and carried that tradition here. And thankfully, we're still able to do it, and it's a beautiful thing. I don't know if I would have known what it was if it wasn't for that original introduction to it myself.
That's really cool. Yeah. So, and just to drive it home for people, doesn't the name Hogshead mean something for you guys?
Absolutely, yeah. A hogshead specifically is a vessel that beer was held in. It was a cooperage vessel. Essentially, it was about 2 U.S. barrels, and it was the name that was attached to the brewery, but it has a historical significance to cask brewing as well.
So in Victorian times, almost everything was shipped in hogshead. It's hard to even fathom that today because it's such a huge cask.
Yeah, I can't
Is it?
imagine rolling those around every day.
And you see pictures of some of the breweries where, yeah, it's huge.
So, was that like a wood barrel?
It's huge.
Yeah,
So
right,
just
right.
two barrel,
It's like a double
62
barrel. Wow.
62
Very
gallons worth.
cool.
That's a big boy.
Great job, Mike.
Nice. Hey,
All right, so let's start talking about the beer a little more. And the way you explain it, it's beer, ale. Where does the process start? Where it's all right. So you like, okay, it's almost done. Is this one going to be cask? We're going to put it in a keg. When do you make that decision? When do you start the process of actually making the beer that will be your cask ale?
That's a great question. So as far as the process is concerned, every beer is pretty much the same until we get to, in our case, the end of primary fermentation. So we let everything run to termination. At that point, we can decide whether we want to make it a cask beer or a keg beer, or we could split it. Mm-hmm. So in our brew house, we're a 10-barrel brew house. So I actually have some 20s as well, or A20.
Fermenter.
I can split batch beers once they've hit termination. What I'll do is I'll pull off beer prior to carbonating. So for any beer that I'm going to serve on keg, I'll transfer to my bright tank, since we don't use our fermenters as uni tanks. We'll transfer that to a bright tank. I may do the whole batch if it's a 10-barrel, and then pull off maybe 4 or 5 barrels of that for cask prior to carbing, and then add sugar and yeast to each cask as I'm filling them. And then I can separate that from the keg beer. And then after that's all done, then I can force carbonate the beer. If the beer is carbed at any level, it's impossible to put into a cask. So it's got to be that order. It's either
big foamy mess
first, or you're going all keg. So.
And you let the beer go terminal gravity. You don't leave it.
We do. I will if I know that I'm doing. Typically, it'll be all cask beer that that I'll do that with, but I can catch it, quarter gravity, that meaning a quarter away from finished gravity, where it still has some active fermentation going. Cask it up without adding priming sugar or additional yeast, and get the carbonation level that I want that way. The tricky part about that is being right on it. If you miss it by a day, you're going to be off. So I typically just go to termination because it gives me more options that way, and it's a lot more flexible.
Okay, great.
So also, I imagine if you don't let it go terminal, it's not going to go in a keg.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you get that flexibility. So I've got 10 more questions now that I started with already. So what are you, I don't want to say, what are you spiking it with? I mean, you said yeast. Is it the same yeast?
I generally try to use the same yeast. In our brew house, we're a pretty small brew house. So, for pretty much all of my ales, I'm using one yeast strain. And then I also brew lagers, and I use typically one yeast strain for that as well. Cuts down on a lot of confusion. It helps me run yeast through at times that I think are healthy for the yeast. So a lot of times, if anything, if it's not coming off the same beer that I have fermented, the same generation, then it'll be off of another beer, but it'll be typically the same yeast strain. I have used lager yeast to condition ales before. And what I've found is that the lager yeast actually prefers that lower temperature range that I usually condition in, whereas ale yeasts are a little more stagnant, a little slower to like get going. What I find with lager yeast is they'll overcarb a little bit in the cask because they kind of like that environment a little bit. They're more conditioned to a 50-degree environment versus, like an ale yeast, which is typically in like a 65, 68-degree fermentation range.
So,
and I don't.
I just had a quick question about the yeast strain.
Yeah.
For the cask beers, does it have like a English origin or English? Does it throw like the typical, English ale yeasts are known for their ester?
Yep.
Compared to something like Chico.
Yep. Yeah. Definitely. The yeast strain that I've landed on for our house strain is the Timothy Taylor's yeast strain.
It's singing my tune. You're singing.
It's beautiful. The interesting thing about our yeast strain is that I actually ran a Timothy Taylor's yeast strain till generation 12 and was still getting like amazing results. It was taken off really quickly, which when I was getting a new pitch of Timothy Taylor yeast, a lot of times it would be a little laggy to start and I'd have to rouse it a little bit. This yeast strain, after a few generations, was just really like kicking off really quickly. It was putting out really nice stone fruity esters. It was just a beautiful yeast, and it was a Gen 12. And I don't have a lot of lab equipment, so I typically go by sensory when it comes to yeast strains. And Gen 12 is about where I'm going to cut everything off. Period. I mean, without a microscope, I'm just like, all right, maybe I'm pushing my limits here. So I was at Gen 12. It was still really rocking, and some folks that own a yeast lab here in town were in our brewery that day, and I mentioned that I was about to dump this yeast down the drain and was kind of bummed about it. And they're like, "Well, do you want us to take a sample of it and we'll just grow it up in our lab? And I'm like, sure, that sounds great. So I say Timothy Taylor's, but it's a Timothy Taylor Hogshead morphed yeast strains.
Very nice.
No,
But
exactly.
it still kicks off really beautiful, like apricot-y, esters, really fruity notes. It's just a beautiful yeast strain.
Killing me here, Robert. You're killing me.
Yep.
Yeah. All these guys that know it. For our home brewing guys and gals, what would be a close commercial version of that? Is there anything even in the realm? I mean, I can see
Yeah,
Neil
I
is
don't
getting
know.
so
I have
happy.
no idea. Like a commercial, I mean, yeah, it's a hard one. I mean, the Timothy Taylors, I don't know how that is commercially sold, but
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that, White Labs 002 is close to a Fuller's, and London Ale's a Boddington's, and I've done the
I
White
can't
Labs
remember which
005.
company it
I made
is,
a
but
best
one of
bitter
the
with
two,
that.
White Labs or White
I'm not
Yeast.
sure
Why
that's
yeast?
another English origin.
Ale yeast, and it's supposedly Timothy Taylor's.
West Yorkshire,
That's
1469
That's it.
is Y yeast. I thought
Yorkshire?
White Labs had a West Yorkshire also.
I think they might have, yeah. Early on, Y yeast was the only one that did it, and it was only seasonal.
Yeah, so yeah,
I think they call it
1469
Yorkshire
Y yeast
Square or
is
something.
AKA Timothy Taylor according to this, but it will not be the Hogshead strain, mind
No,
you.
of course not.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
It won't, but I mean, can we get a little close, because I'm excited
yeah,
to
I don't
try
know if we'll
some
have
of this
time
stuff.
for it today, but
I
I'd love
wanna
to get
see
your
if I
tips on that
can
because I
make
brewed with
something
the West
kingdom in the
Yorkshire
realm.
once, and I know it's temperature temperamental. I think it stalled on me.
yeah.
I'll see if we can come back to that. There's so much just about the cask for you to answer. And Neil, you asked a great question. You asked, y'all are knocking my questions out. That's great, but I still have more.
No, no.
All right. So you're spiking it with that yeast, and you have a lab that's growing it up for you. That's outstanding. And what is the sugar you're adding to grow it up?
We used basically like a simple syrup concoction that's brown sugar and water, basically.
You doing that because you can boil it?
Yep.
Perfect.
Boil it, sterilize it. And then we're, adding a specific amount by volume of the cask vessels that we're in. We have 3 different size, I will say 3 for the most part, different size casks that we serve out of. We have a 5-gallon pin. We have a 10 or 12-gallon Birkin. That's why I say there's a little wiggle room.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a 22-gallon Kilderkin. So you're going to basically, obviously move your numbers up for the volume as it moves up. So, but we have very specific amounts of yeast and very specific amounts of simple syrup sugar that we add back, or priming sugar that we add back to the casks based on volume.
You targeting 1 to 1.5 volume CO2, or is it just you've done the process until you like what it does?
Yeah, I would say we're just shy of 2, to be honest with you, when we're at our finished product.
Do you want to give the zinger? See, fellas, it's not flat. It's not flat.
It's not flat. It's not warm either. It's cellar temperature.
That's outstanding. Good stuff. So I want to back up again. Like I said, questions pop in my head. You're coming out of fermentation with very low carb. Your fermenters, are you open top fermenting, or are you?
We're in closed conicals. So yeah, I just basically am using, letting it blow off until I'm ready to cap it. And usually at that point, there's not a lot of CO2 being generated, so I'm not building up a lot of pressure on the tank. And if I do build up much pressure, I'll bleed it off a little bit. I usually never go above like 2 psi on my tanks. otherwise I get into trouble with the self-carbonating issue.
Yeah.
Spunding.
Yeah, I'm imagining transferring the beer with carb can be an issue. I mean, I much smaller homebrew conical. And when I transferred, I kind of transfer under pressure, but mainly it's an oxygen thing. I'm pretty sure Mike does the same thing. So Mike's making NEPAs and hazies, and you can't have oxygen in those. It's a big deal. But that's, I mean, carb's not an issue for us. We have a little bit of back pressure, and it's far less carb, but there is still some CO2 in there. But you're managing to do all this and not have too much CO2 as you finally get it into your vessel to prime up to about just under 2 volumes of CO2. All right, so the recipe for these beers, I know you put them in kegs. I know you put them in casks. Are you using malts that you might not use if you totally weren't considering cask ale? Are you trying to keep anything more residual or anything? Obviously you're making British ales, and most of us only know a couple of recipes to start with. Maybe this isn't something that can be separated out because you're making true British ale. You're not making anything different than true British ale. So there isn't anything you're technically doing different other than making recipes that are true British ale. But you did brew at some other breweries. Do you see any variances in the kind of recipes you brew for these casks versus where you've been at the other breweries?
I would say that it's more style specific and it's personal, to be honest with you. I personally prefer my lagers to be a little colder and more carved up. I feel the same way about Belgian style beers, so I personally don't tend to serve them on cask. Not that they couldn't be. We do occasionally we'll have cask fests where we'll invite other breweries to bring a cask of beer, or we'll fill a cask of their beer at their place and serve it on cask at our place on an engine. And we'll do lagers. We've done Kolsch's, we've done Dunkels, we've done Belgian style beers, and I mean they do drink great. They're fine. But I would say from our standpoint as a brewery, we do tend to lean into more UK centric styles. We do an Irish red. We have a 70 shilling Scottish heavy that's coming out. So we lean into a lot of the styles that I think translate very well to a cask presentation.
So do you think, especially for your cask beers, do you think the maltster makes a big difference using
the malt?
British made malts, British made hops.
Yeah, I do.
You get good results either way.
I mean, I think you can brew any kind of beer and present it on cask. That I don't think one really is tied to the other necessarily. What I would say about malts ingredients is we use a lot of English malts because we brew a lot of English beers, and I believe in. I mean, I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. English beers are English by ingredients, by the nature of the water, everything that made them what they are. So for me to use ingredients that don't make sense in an English beer, like using a Belgian yeast strain in ESB, doesn't make any sense to me, I mean, it's just simple logic to me to just use British ingredients for British beers.
Yeah, and that was the point of my question. Is
right? I figured that's what you meant.
I don't think you can make a good British style beer without using British ingredients.
Right.
I had also heard
I've used American malts to make them. It's not the same.
Agreed.
I was going to follow up a little bit with the British Isles malts versus American malts, and I heard an interesting commentary on protein content, and I know that British ale is designed to be brilliantly clear, and protein content's a big deal with beer clarity, and I know isinglass is a big thing for dropping yeast, and they I've heard a lot about Simpsons and these certain types of malts that are lower in protein. Do you guys purposely select for lower protein malts to try to get the beer to clear up faster, or you're selecting for beer clarity kind of things? Or
actually, I don't go into it thinking about that necessarily, but interestingly, I use Simpsons primarily for everything. So
yeah, I'm a Golden Promise guy myself.
I guess I'm getting it by de facto or whatever.
Okay, yeah, because I guess the American two rows have very high proteins, especially S over T, like soluble to total, and versus the British malts. So I'm a big
love it.
Golden Promise guy myself.
Yeah,
my British ales are made with Golden Promise. And
most of my smashes are Golden Promise. Well, all right. Let's go ahead and take another short break. We're going to come back with lots of more good stuff about Cask Ales. We got a lot to talk about, fellas.
Are you looking for a simple brewing system that's great for all grain brewing, but everything on the market seems to be full of compromises? Blickman Engineering has the answer. The Blickman Brew Easy All Grain Brewing System. The Brew Easy is a complete system with easy upgrades and a beautiful compact design, perfect for any size brewing location. At its core, the Brew Easy is built on two gorgeous Blickman Boilermaker brew kettles, a high-temperature March pump, and either a top-tier gas burner or the new Boil Coil electric heater. The Brew Easy adapter lid allows the pots to stack on top of each other, forming an efficient, strong, and compact brewing setup that comes in 5, 10, and 20-gallon batch sizes. Upgrade your Brew Easy system with full automated control by adding a Blickman Tower of Power temp controller, and make moving around easy with the Blickman Kettle Cart. The Brew Easy is modular. If you already own a Boilermaker kettle, you can build your Brew Easy by purchasing just the modules you need. The new Brew Easy all-grain brewing system. See it today at blickmanengineering.com and brew with Blickman quality on your new Brew Easy.
Learning to brew has never been so disgusting. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back here. It's Big Mike and TC talking to Robert Bell of Hogshead Brewing and our great friend Neil Spake about Cask Ales. And we are going to, I think a lot of what we're talking about does apply to home brewing, but we're going to have to get into some techniques on that eventually. But I'd like to keep going through the process if we can. Robert, so you gave us the short process, and everyone who's at this point should have heard that of you brew it. Yeah, you transfer to your bright. You don't carb if it's going to go into the cask. You get into your cask. You got to spike it with some sugar. You told us about the sugar and a little bit of yeast, and we're going towards that 1.9 volumes. I'll forget all this tomorrow, though. Don't worry. I don't have any of your trade secrets recorded or anything. This isn't recording, is it? So, all right. So, can you talk to us about handling the firkin from that point to all right, we've got the beer in it. We've put our yeast in it, or you can even talk about if you have a special way of transferring this yeast and the quality, how you handle all that. We talk about that up until serving it.
Sure. All right. So once we get into the cask, we need to condition it for a minimum of 10 days to 2 weeks. 2 weeks is optimal, but we can push it to 10 days. I don't like to cut it any shorter than that. We condition in an environment that is set at 50 degrees. So it stays a constant 50 degrees all year round. That's what we found as the optimal conditioning temperature for our beers to recondition. Once we've hit that 10-day, 2-week period, we then will tap the cask. all of this like takes specialized equipment, which is one of the reasons that I think it becomes a challenge for a lot of home brewers. You need a wedge or something that you can slam into the keystone to serve the beer. You need a cask, you need keystones, you need a sheave to hammer into the side to fill it. But once you have all this stuff ready to go and you hammer in your wedge, at that point you want to off gas your cask. This is where everything gets really fun. All the fun videos online about people hammering in, that's where it goes wrong. but you do that, and at that point, that's when we actually clear the beer. We'll add in our case we've moved away from isinglass to biofine, which is a silicate kind of
So you're using the biofine clear. Regular biofine is closer to gelatin, I believe. So biofine clear.
Colloidal silica.
What's that?
It's a colloidal silica.
Oh,
it's really neat because it's a vegan. Yeah. I use that too.
Same.
I like,
it's great.
Silicone.
Yeah.
Silicone.
A little goes a long way too. So, but yeah, we then we biofine every single cask once we've tapped it and we've let it blow off a little bit and relieve the pressure. And then at that point, it's ready to serve 7 to 10 hours later once it clears up. But going back to the whole clear beer thing, that is definitely one of the attributes or one of the things that people really key into on cask beer is the clarity. People talk about reading newspapers through their beer, and that's what we try to achieve with every beer that we serve. To the point where we've trained even our regular customers to return our beers if they don't look like that. So
awesome.
It's good. It's good. It's a quality thing, and it's important. It's we don't make cask beer because it's easy. We make it because it's good and it's important.
So
nice.
This may be far too anal, but I'm going to ask it. So
we like that on the show.
Yeah. When you rack it to the keg, do you leave it a hard spile the whole while it's sitting, and then when you're ready to degas it? Because I always hear about this. Oh, we got a hard spile, and then we put a soft one in that has something. I don't know anything about cellaring. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. No, that's an awesome question. Most people don't even know what a spile is, I'm sure.
Should we explain what a spile is?
Sure.
That's what I was going to say. Can we get a little info?
I'm going back to, I know I was bouncing around a little bit about the components of a cask, the sheave and the keystone. The keystone is if you had a cask sitting upright, you would have the point that you serve out of on one side of that cask. That's a hole about that big.
On the side.
About the size of a 50-cent piece or whatever, if those things even exist anymore. And on the side of it, you're going to have a much bigger hole that you would fill that cask with. So that cask, when it's filled, is going to be sitting horizontal and it's filled that way. And then you hammer in that, and then you tap out of the top, if that makes sense.
That side piece you hammer in, does that have a name?
What's that?
The side plug you hammered in to cap it off, does that have a name?
The side...
you fill and you plug it.
The bung? I don't know. Yeah.
It's a generic name for probably a lot of ports on the barrel in general, like any kind of barrel you get. Yeah. Okay, we're good with that. I'm only trying to clarify in case it's an important thing that we're going to revisit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no kidding.
All right, so
Um,
we bunged that up. Then you've rotated it back on edge, on side, whatever. And
yep,
for everyone who's playing along, it's like if you had your keg laying sideways on the ground, it's filled. Then it's bunged, and then you stood it up
yep.
effectively.
And
Okay.
you're having, so the keystone is already in. So you have basically a closed vessel that you're pouring in one spot from.
Mhm.
And once that's filled, then you hammer in your shive or your sheave, however you want to say it. And once that's hammered in, then you have a sealed environment. So that's where your pressure is going to build up. And then when you're tapping it, you're going to tap it through the small hole at the top, which is known as the it's the keystone or the
Yeah.
keel, basically. So that's where your widge would go in and where you can vent from as well. Our widges have a point that you serve from and a vent as well. If you are serving a beer on stillage, you would serve out of one point, hammer a spile, as Neil was speaking of, into the sheave itself, the shive, whatever, and that would allow the oxygen to sort of go in to displace what you're pulling out of the cask, but not let a lot of O2 in. So we don't do it that way. We don't serve on stillage. We actually serve off of breathers. So we actually have a blanket of CO2 going into our beer through the vent.
Mm-hmm.
And so we serve out of the large opening of our widge and then breathe CO2 over the beer from the vent side.
Okay.
So that blankets the beer with CO2, and that will actually preserve the beer for a longer period of time. But it
won't tell
also
the can.
gives you a displacement gas.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you have your instead of O2 coming in, you have CO2 blanketing the beer.
Now, these are still wooden casks, correct?
They
These
are not.
flat wood.
We use primarily we use stainless steel.
Okay, so they're steel, just like your keg at home, but they're
Yep,
just designed to pour this beer in a non-pressurized environment
correct.
where things are hammered into place.
Yep,
Okay.
exactly.
So
There's no screws, no gaskets.
but what's important, I think,
Bungs.
one of the components you were talking about, which name escapes me because it's a lot of new names for me. Your beer engine is going to draw like a pump out of your keg or out of your cask.
Correct. Yep.
And that's why you don't need pressure to push it. You don't need to overcarbonate it in the meantime.
Correct.
You're gonna draw a draft, one pump at a time.
Yes, correct.
Okay, so
yeah, it's
so
sort of
most
like a hand pump for water, essentially.
Yep.
Like a one way pump. It only comes out, doesn't go back.
most of what you said could be done in a homebrewer's keg. The pump part is the hard part so far.
Yeah. However, when it comes to cask beer, it really, I actually do believe as long as you have a vessel to put the beer in, like a cask, and for homebrewers, I would absolutely suggest, if you want to get into cask beer, I would suggest looking into getting a pin. A pin is a 5-gallon vessel. So it's essentially the volume that a lot of homebrewers are already brewing at. Get one of those. There's a place called UK Brewing Supplies that you can go online. You can order some of this stuff. There's other places I'm sure that carry it. That's the company that I use. I guess that's a plug for them. But they have all the parts that you would need to do it. And it's essentially like a larger scale of bottle conditioning. It's ultimately the same thing.
but you're not sticking in the corner and sitting on it for about 3 months and saying, "Is my beer good yet?" It's about 2 weeks and the beer's good.
Right.
Yeah. What was it? Oh, so along the lines of where you said you could locate those parts, um, beer engines are they still made, or is everybody buying like old beer engines and rebuilding them?
You can still get them. They're just very
Yeah.
expensive,
They're
cost prohibitive.
they're
in the US.
amazingly expensive. Yeah, they are. We typically, like, when I'm looking for an engine, I'm not right now. I have a number of them, but we have 11 currently, 12, I think, 12. But yeah, if you go online and you find anything for that's less than $450, you're doing all right.
These have like glass pistons, correct? And then
Yeah, you're.
I remember Jamil. I mean, this show they did in 2009, I believe they were talking about there's quarter pint and half pint pump.
Yep.
What size do you recommend?
Gosh, I mean, we have both, to be honest with you. Which do I prefer? I mean, I cut the half pint. The half pint pour is always good, to be honest with you. I like that.
Fewer pumps.
One pull, and you got like a tenner, or two, and you get 20. It's great.
Yeah, that's what the only thing they were saying was, Jamil and John back in the day, they were talking about the smaller one might be better because you keep less beer in the engine in between pours.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a thing. I was
Probably
curious what you guys thought.
I would think that's a good point, but
Yeah.
when you're and you're
That-
moving as much as they are, it probably doesn't matter as much. But
Right.
You're right.
that's a very valid point.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Anyways.
We move a lot of cask beer. When you talk about, like, the whole beers going bad and staling, I mean, we're using, like I said, CO2 breathers, but we're also going through casks, in 3 days or less. So,
Perfect timing.
so it's like the breathers are really almost overkill for us for most things. And some beers don't spoil as quickly as other beers either. I mean, you can have like a high ABV beer, like a barley wine or an old ale. I've had those that have been sitting on a cask for 2 weeks and they still taste good. I mean, they
taste better.
The character,
Nice.
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask is over those time, is there kind of a bell curve for the flavor, or is it kind of as good as it is the day of and then down the slope, or?
Well, I mean, yes, there is a bell curve, I guess, to the flavor. But again, I think it comes down to like a personal preference to a certain degree as well. I'm kind of like a day 2, 3 guy. Like I like a little bit of oxygenation. I think it brings a little character to the beer. But after that, I don't love it as much. Once it gets past that, but then there's other people that they like a beer that's on day 5.
Funky.
Well, I can't
Well,
think
they're
how many times I've had people come in and go, man, the Cook Lane best bitter is drinking great today. And I'm like, this cask has been on for like 5 days, man.
Well, I think Mike was getting at it. There's a flavor bell curve and then there's off flavor bell curve. And, it's not the same, especially when you're using the CO2 breather. It helps. You're not going to have necessarily off flavor, the flaw verging on infection kind of flavor in 5 days, but you definitely are having some oxidation is probably happening. It's probably not a perfect environment because you're only half PSI or so of pressure.
What's that?
You're only about a half PSI or so of pressure on your makeup.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So what was it? So are you guys throwing hops? I have 2 questions. We do the hops first, since I already said it. Are you throwing hops in your pins as you're getting ready to serve them or anything like that?
That's a great question as well. That was our standard practice for a long time was dosing each cask, which is great. It gives you a lot of flexibility. You can play around a lot with your hop profile, per cask if you want. But what I've found, what I really like as far as the hop character that I'm getting is in a dry hop in the fermentation process and then casking, rather than dosing each cask. I think the hop quality is a lot brighter. It's a lot less oxidized than I find that it can be in the cask if I just dose the cask. That's what I find.
It's dawning on me that you have a distinct advantage. You don't have to transport your cask across town to be served at someone else's bar where you have zero control of it. You get to keep it in your own environment. It's not getting bounced around the back of some horse and buggy from 150 years ago kind of thing going on, where they need those hops as antiseptic properties as they tap it at the pub where you hope they have some form of managing it well so it's not infected before they finish serving it. So it's outstanding that you get to do that. And that speaks more to what homebrewers are doing. We're not transporting our beers across town to leave at Tommy's house and let Tommy just do bad stuff with our keg and we never get to see our keg again.
Right.
So you can, Neil, would you ever thought that you could dry hop a British ale?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's very common practice in the UK. They have Fullers, right?
Yeah. Are they doing it?
They pitch some East Kent Goldings.
Oh, nice.
Gas go out, and that freshness that you get those first. I'm a 2-3 day kind of guy too. It's an amazing character. It really is.
Very cool.
I'm sorry, you guys are getting me like. I want to make one of these. I just want to make one. All this talk about beauty and flavor, and I love British ale, but I've only ever had them on keg, and this is like the next step for me. How do homebrewers do this? Like, I want that.
Very
carefully. Yeah.
Yes. Very cool. So, you're not throwing the hops in there. You are doing British styles largely, but not exclusively. And you obviously you're sourcing your malts, and you're probably sourcing your hops as British hops. And Neil just said what probably the most popular American British hop, East Kent Goldings, EKG. Are you? I mean, since you're dry hopping, your flexibility is out the window at this point in time. Do you care if it's even whole leaf, or are you fine with pellets?
I actually prefer pellets. To be honest with you.
interesting.
Probably falls out easier.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I feel like I get less loss and more utilization.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big one. I would think the beer loss and then control of flavor can be kind of crazy with whole cones.
By definition of a T90, it should be more efficient by about 10%.
Yeah.
It's also gotten incredibly difficult to find British whole hops.
Yeah, I bet. So
it used to be common 20 years ago, but now almost impossible.
That's sad. It's a shame. I wonder if our friends over at Blue Lake, they're packaging Michigan hops probably exclusively. I don't know if they'd look at getting in a bale of, well, it wouldn't be the same. I mean, because they're literally doing wet hop packaging. My hops, I've never seen hops like that. I'm gonna stop talking about it sooner or later, but it's very interesting. So that's great. You're doing things that people might have called heresy, but you're proving that it's not. Because you're able to serve it there. So you don't have to do it. And Jamel's always said that just because a pro does it doesn't mean you're supposed to do it, because sometimes a pro does what they have to do. So as you don't have to do what maybe a brewery in England has to do because their beer's going across town, who knows where it's going to sit between here and there, you're able to adapt your process to, hey, I'm brewing it right there. I'm going to serve it right here. I'm going to do what makes the best beer. And, we bend the rules a little bit, or we're making the rules because we have this opportunity here. That's very cool to me. I'm really digging that.
on the whole idea of recipes. I assume you just have a staple type of recipes that you normally just do, right? You do a mild and a bitter, and
Yeah.
how distinctly different are they? Like from a because if you go look at a bunch of what little information there is out there, like the Brewer's Almanac that did all the real ale quote things. Roger Protz collected all these recipes from all these English breweries. You look at them; they're very similar. So, what few things would you attribute to? Okay, this ingredient or the way that we either mash this particular beer or how we want it to ferment out makes it unique compared to another one, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
What are those little magical points that say, oh, well, when I think of that beer, this is the character I'm thinking of, and this is why it gets that character.
Right. I would say, I mean, it really depends on style, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, you brought up an English mild. Definitely have an English mild on. The qualities that I look for in an English mild, at least the English mild that we have, and like you said, our I haven't changed the recipe that I've landed on for that beer at all. But what I try to achieve with a beer like that is more of a chocolatey, toasty, almost pretzely kind of quality to it. A lot of flavor complexity in a beer that comes in at 3.8%, which is a beautiful, magical balancing act, I think, as most English beers, in my opinion, are. And then you get into the bitter scale. You got an ordinary bitter, the best bitter, and the extra special bitter. You could literally just scale up um, ingredients as you go up that scale and make essentially the same beer, but increasing your volumes as you go up. However, you got to do it incrementally. Balance is the name of the game when it comes to English style ales, as far as I'm concerned. That's what makes them so challenging. Everything has to have a voice that speaks pretty confidently in a beer. Your malt has to have a backbone to it. Your hops have to balance your malt. Your yeast has to have an estery profile that brings it all together. And that just increases, like I said, in the bitter scale as you go up. You can change things up a little bit. Some of my beers are heavy on Maris Otter. Some of them are heavy on Golden Promise, and that can kind of change subtly the flavors of the beers.
Because they are different.
Yeah, my favorite beer is a Golden Promise base that has like a kiss of crystal malt, and that's pretty much it. You know?
No,
That's my favorite beer.
I'm gonna brew an English ale like right after this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. I sorry to even interject what I said because that was poetry. That was gorgeous.
Oh, that was awesome. That
explanation
so good.
Tremendous.
Yeah, we did get a question quite a while back. I think you answered because remember we do have live chat here and you can ask us questions. The question was Simpsons, Thomas Fawcett's. I keep hitting caps lock instead of alt tab. Simpsons, Thomas Fawcett's. Crisp. You had said you buy a lot of Simpson.
I do.
Yeah. So and well, it's great malt and it's available. You know that's
absolutely
yeah. Now and I'll add one note to that. If my memory serves me, Thomas Fawcett does sell a Golden Promise, and the only reason he can sell the Golden Promise is because he guarantees if it's got his name on the bag, it's floor malted. Because I believe Simpson owns the owns the trademark, whatever, to that, or maybe the fields it's grown in. But Simpson's does some floor malt and some regular. But if it's got Thomas Fawcett's name on the sack, it's floor malted. And I've seen that floor malting, at Thomas Fawcett's. I've been there, which is pretty cool.
That is very cool.
And Neil, you triggered a memory. It's a tale I love that I don't think we would do, and it sounds like you don't do it, Robert. We were in York, and I asked the brewer. I said, "Okay, bitter versus best bitter. Do you use a different malt?" And I'm just kind of joking, like there's no way to use a different malt. And he says, "Oh, absolutely. We use our premium malt for our best bitter." I'm like, "We would never do that. We just buy the one good malt and use it for everything." But he had a lesser. I don't know which malt was lesser, but it probably didn't have as like he had some Halcyon there. I think Halcyon's grown up in that part of England.
Yeah,
and so he had sacks and sacks of and all right. So I'll go just a little bit further with the story. Sorry. He had a difference between his malt for his bitter and his malt for his best bitter, but it was all pre-milled, which we only do that if we have to. I guess he had to technically, but you think in a brewery in York's probably been open long enough to have his own mill. Maybe not.
I think so.
So that was an interesting story on British ales and the fact that he would actually separate out a different base malt. For, like you said, it's essentially a stepped up version of the same beer. He could have used the same malts, but probably a buck less a sack. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but isn't that kind of a tax thing? Like to try to entice people to pay for the bigger beer, which costs more in tax, they'd use the better ingredients. And that's why it's called best bitter. It's because they're using their best ingredients to try to entice people to pay that higher price.
Maybe. I've always thought of it as the alcohol scale. It's equivalent between the 60, 70.
Well, I know that.
He's agreeing with you on that. Yeah, it's the alcohol scale is why you pay more tax. But would you use a better malt so people would feel better about paying more? I just feel better about paying more for more alcohol usually.
That's really interesting. I don't know that I've heard that before.
Huh?
I'm not going to ask you what brewery that was.
I'd have to stretch myself to remember. The beers were all fantastic, though, mind you. All right, so let's go ahead and take our last break, and then we're gonna get some closing comments, closing thoughts, anything we haven't thought of up to date. All right, be right back.
Back to the two guys that know how to turn beer into beer. This is Brew Strong.
And we're back, and we're towards the end of the show. And if you don't realize we've been talking to Robert Bell of Hogshead and Neil Spake about Cask Ale, then I don't know how you skipped ahead so far, but that's where we're at. It's TC and Big Mike here asking all the dumb questions to all the smart people.
That's what we do.
All right. So I had here a question. I think we've covered it, or at least I made an assumption. Are you sending your casks outside of the brewery? You said you fill casks for other people with their beer.
Yeah, for special events, we'll do that. We'll go to other breweries with our casks, fill their beer in our casks, condition them, and serve them for what we call like a cask fest. We have that twice a year, I believe, at the brewery, 2-3 times a year. But as far as shipping beer outside of the brewery, we do have a few accounts that we do that with. It is a real challenge, I will say that. A lot of what has been talked about as far as beer that has gone too far or is not well taken care of, it's very apparent when it comes to cask beer. It's not like keg beer. You need people that kind of care about it, keep an eye on it, sell it. So, yeah, we're very targeted in places that we do ship our beer, but we do have a couple of accounts that we've worked very closely with and actually put in their cask systems, their engines, and everything, and got them up to speed so they could serve the beer. And we've had good experiences and bad experiences in the past with that, but right now we have a couple of folks that are doing a decent job.
Sounds like Hogshead has some tied houses, Neil.
Yeah.
Watch it.
They're starting to live the English promise.
Yeah.
Was it? I forgot what's that? It's something tight houses. Yeah, it's good beer tight houses. I guess something like that.
Hmm.
Isn't that the English term for making sure you keep a good control on your beer?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe so. So
I suck. I should remember these things.
we'll cover that some other point in time. Or everyone listening has their Google, but remember, Google lies. We tell the truth. Come on back. So I did see Hogshead cans. I think I was looking at Untapped the other day. Are you canning the Cask Ales? You're canning your Keg Ales?
We only can keg beer. Yeah,
Makes sense.
Unfortunately, keg or cask beer doesn't travel very well. We don't growler, can cask beer. It doesn't work out. Maybe if we had Guinness's widgets in our cans, we could. But
yeah.
Apart from that, no, we're on our own.
It's
an interesting point too. Guinness created the whole. Well, I won't say they created it. They brought the nitro game to the market to mimic cask beer, which is actually one of the easiest ways that I have to sell cask beer to somebody that has no idea what it is. I say, have you ever had a Guinness on nitro? And most people can say, yeah, or I know what that is.
Right.
And wrap their heads around it that way. But as far as transferring cask beer out of house, it doesn't really travel very well.
So do you do English beers as keg beers that you can?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. We are not real big into canning. We actually don't even have our own canning line. We have somebody else in town that does it for us. So we usually do about 3 brands a quarter, I would say. And in the winter months, it's an English style porter, an ESB, and an IPA. And in the summertime, we do an ESB, a Mexican lager, and an IPA.
Nice.
Yeah. An IPA is sort of British anyway.
That's where it originated.
Originally.
We won't tell anybody. Wait, we just told everybody.
All right. So I had a question. It might be putting you on the spot, Robert. You don't have to tell me. Lager yeast, the different temperature it ferments at, different top fermenting, bottom fermenting. But lager yeast also, some lager yeast, maybe not all lager yeast, they have a better ability to ferment maltotrios. So following lager yeast up after your ale yeast, as you finish your cask up, I was going to ask you which lager strain you liked, if you can share that information, because the wrong lager yeast might not just give you a little bit drier beer; it might give you a lot drier beer.
Right. What I've used in the past, and like I said, I typically try to use whatever yeast strain that I have brewed the beer on. So typically, I'll try and use that Hogshead / Timothy Taylor strain when I'm secondary fermenting. But if I'm going to secondary ferment with a lager strain, I mean, I use a lot of dry pitches for my lager yeast, to be honest with you. The 3470. Yeah, I'll use that quite a bit, the Westfaner. But if I don't use that, I will use if I have a liquid pitch, it's a Mexican lager yeast strain, to be honest, because it's just so clean and so versatile. So
nice.
But yeah, those are it.
All right. Do you guys have anything else before I ask my final question? or you guys ask questions?
Yeah,
Figures 10 more of mine.
I've been waiting all night
He's
to
been
see
waiting
like
forever.
how does the home brewer make his bitter and mimic the cask ale. I had a couple ideas. I was going to kind of throw them out there.
Throw
I
them
know
out.
this might.
I
I
want to
hope I
hear
don't take.
your ideas.
All right, so I had this idea where I do 10-gallon batches,
All right.
and I was thinking I'd do 10 gallons, and I'd get a couple of these. I was thinking if they had smaller, like 1-gallon kind of cask vessels, I could kind of rack onto those, and then I'd have my 1-gallon like party vessel that I could crack, and then 3 to 5 days I can drink that. And then I kind of have one after the other where I'm basically turning my 10-gallon batch. And like I kind of like what you said about how sometimes you'll keg half of it and cask the other half.
Right.
But I thought I was going to run that by you. Like, what? I know that might be really expensive to do, but I just was thinking of for the home brewer, maybe I don't think a 5-gallon pin might be good because they're not going to drink 5 gallons in a week. They're going to drink 5 gallons in a month. So
Right.
that 1 gallon or something smaller, or even like a corny keg. Maybe you can make some modifications to make it a cask like a piece of equipment. But that was kind of bring it back to the home brewer. We want to make it too. How do we do that?
Yeah.
Can I quickly interject here?
Yeah. Go for it.
A good friend of mine has been brewing forever, and he loves to do cask beer, British beer. He's a huge fan. In fact, he just bought it flat in York. So he spends 3 or 4 months a year over in York. But he would have cask ale parties. And as a home brewer, you can buy these 1-gallon cardboard boxes that have a plastic container in them.
Like a party ball.
Yep. And he would, he would rack the beer in there. He would add some sugar, add some dry hop, let it condition, and then serve it at these parties.
Yeah.
Of course, it's gravity feed, right? You can't.
Yeah.
So excited. I want to try that.
That's
so bad.
cheap, right?
Yeah. I think the two of you have the idea.
I'll ask him where he gets those things and then let you know.
But you could do that. You could buy like a little 1-gallon torpedo where you have your 5 gallons, don't carb it, and transfer off your 5-gallon a gallon at a time into your torpedo, spike your torpedo, and that becomes your 1 gallon of real ale for a few days.
Yeah.
You just got to get creative.
I've
actually done it in a sixtel before, where I just to try it out, I filled a sixtel, not all the way, filled it with wort, and then added priming sugar and yeast to it, and let it secondary ferment for 2 weeks at 50 degrees in the sixtel, and got pretty decent results out of it.
Yeah.
I mean,
did you
I wouldn't have done it over a cask, but I just wanted to see if it would work.
Yeah.
Did you still? I mean, Mike. I think Mike's big question on that is: were you still trying to serve it in 3 to 5 days, or?
No, because it was. I actually had it in like a sealed Sankey style sixtel. So I mean, it had life for the whole thing, but I also pushed it with CO2, so it wasn't like whatever you would say classically cask beer, but it was a cask conditioned keg, I guess you would say.
Nice.
I think you need to get a rack, set your CO2 way low, and almost gravity feed. But you still have a time.
Yeah.
I mean, your time should stretch out. If you have your CO2 set low enough, because you're just making up a CO2. It's just how you manage your gravity feed, so you don't overcarb, you don't make the wrong beer after it's in the keg.
Right.
But I like really the smaller serving option too. Well, I like
being sub 2 volume. Yeah.
Very cool. All right.
Awesome.
So my final question. Any final thoughts on, if I want to make quality cask ale, is there anything that I didn't ask you, Neil didn't ask you, Mike didn't come up with great ideas on the 1 gallons, et cetera, on how to homebrew adapts it? Anything we haven't covered? It seems like we covered a whole lot of stuff.
I mean, just the basics of brewing, be very clean. I'm a proponent of using ingredients of the origin of the beer style you want to brew. Take time, don't rush anything. Cask beer is all about time. It's not a great money making venture if you want to economize your time. That's for sure.
Awesome.
But essentially, the reason that we do what we do isn't because it's the most efficient way to do it. It's because it's one of the best ways to drink beer. So, in my opinion,
I totally agree.
Yeah, outstanding. All right. Well, Robert, I want to really thank you for coming on the show. It's great knowledge and great to meet you. And I can't wait the next time I make it back to Denver because I'm going to Hogshead.
Yeah.
Heck yeah, me too. I'm in. I'm in. Let me know when you're going. I'm going too.
All right.
I want to try all of them.
Let's do it.
Good stuff. All right. And if you're listening live, we're going to have a show right after this Q&A. And if you're not listening live, well, you can listen to us in about 2 weeks. And don't forget our sponsors. Blickman's has been around with this show longer than I have. I go way back on this show, but not like Blickman. Blickman goes back forever. And I didn't mention that, we're filling in for our great friend Jamil, and we hope to have him back on the show as soon as possible. Don't forget the rest of our great sponsors. Anyone who's sponsoring the show is paying for the show, so you don't have to. So you can get this great information for free. Wherever you find your podcasts, or you can watch us on video on Facebook and YouTube. It'll be on YouTube. I don't talk about the Brew Network YouTube channel enough, but you guys should go visit it. That's all I have for the show. Brew strong, everybody.
Brew strong.